Hi, everybody. This is Hondo Carpenter from Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation, Las Vegas Raiders Insider Podcast. Joined now by my good buddy, the great Matt Halatic from the Spun.com, not only a colleague, but one of my best friends. And we got a lot to talk about. Apologize about my throat, changing weather, and I have literally been doing interviews all over all over the country. So I apologize about that, but that doesn't stop us. We're going to keep going. Matt, I want to dig in on the Raiders. Bye week. I predicted before training camp, when the schedule came out, I thought they would be 5-7 at this point. After training camp, I still said I thought they'd be 5-7. They're exactly what we thought they were, at least what I thought they were. I thought but at this team, when you look at it, when you look at the remaining schedule, beating the Chiefs at the Chiefs is going to be extremely difficult. I consider that a loss. That puts them 5-8. Then they come up, they got the Colts, the Bolts, the Colts, the Bolts, the Broncos, and the Vikings, all winnable to me. So this team is clearly right where I thought they would be, with a chance to go 9-8. Again, we're going to talk today about Antonio. We're going to talk about his coaches and players, but just to me, they're right where we thought they would be. I don't think it's time to press the panic button on this team at all.
No, I don't. I mean, they got to this point, the circuitous route with firing Josh McDaniels and all that stuff. But I think record wise, this is where I kind of felt they'd be as well. I think I said 7 wins for the season, potential for 8, and I thought they would be 5-7 basically at this point. I think that, down the stretch, looking at that schedule, if I had to say right now, I think they do lose to the Chiefs. And I think they win 3 of the other 4 games. I have them now finishing 8-9. So, again, that's in that 8-9 win range, like you said, outside of the playoff picture, but improvement from last year. And I think if that comes to fruition, I think that shouldn't be understated, especially considering some of the turmoil they had early on, and the fact they had another coaching change midseason for the second time in 3 years.
All right, I want to talk about, we're going to go right down the list. We're going to talk about Aiden O'Connell, the quarterback, first. Um, I don't think we've seen enough to call him a bona fide QB1, nor do I think we've seen enough to say he's a failure at all. And there are people on both extremes, as you can imagine. He had the
Right.
highest QBR in the NFL on Sunday. He played, over 100. He played extremely well. They took 1 sack, but no penalties, no interceptions, no fumbles, no turnovers. He is progressively getting better every single week. You can see what they're working on with him, and he's not repeating mistakes. Still holds the ball at times a little bit longer, but in fairness to him, he didn't get sacked, so he was able to hold it a little bit longer because he had the coverage. So I don't know that you would actually call that a holding it too long when he's got the protection. But this is a kid, I think there's a lot of things to be encouraged about. There are things to be concerned about. I like a quarterback with an ability to run. I'm not talking about, to me, Patrick Mahomes is the perfect balance. He doesn't run every time he can, but when he runs, he's a weapon. And it's very hard to find a quarterback. CJ Stroud is showing signs of it, but it's very hard to find a quarterback who can know when to run and when to stay in the pocket. So, but overall, I think the Rook, 4 games in, I'm not counting the Charger game because Josh McDaniels did nothing to help him. 4 games in with a very limited playbook, I've been impressed. Again, not ready to anoint him a failure or the future, but I've been impressed. Your thoughts?
Well, I think the thing that we're getting from him, assuming hopefully he stays healthy the last 5 games, is that you're getting a nice, excuse me, a nice base of tape to
Mm-hmm.
evaluate going into the offseason. Whether that's with Champ Kelly and Antonio Pierce there in permanent roles, or whoever comes in, they will be able to see what they have in Aiden O'Connell and say, okay, this is where we want to go with this kid. Um, and again, it all sort of depends on where the Raiders are in the draft, what quarterbacks are available. Do they think there's somebody worth taking a swing on, or do they say, hey, maybe we feel comfortable playing this kid next year as our main guy, and that'll give us a full season to evaluate him. And if we don't like where he's at after 2024, then we can pull the trigger on maybe a first round guy at the position to build around. But I think he's shown some really good things on tape. I thought when I watched him against the Giants and the Jets, I was really impressed by his composure.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think he looked rattled or flustered or confused by what they were throwing at him. And considering, here's the thing: now neither of those teams is very good, but the Giants' defense had been playing well coming into the game, and the Jets actually do have one of the better defenses in the league. Their offense has just been what's kept them down. So I think when you look at the fact he was able to do what he did in those games this past Sunday against Steve Spagnuolo, a guy who's won multiple Super Bowls as a defensive coordinator, and is known to make things tough on young quarterbacks. He posts that QBR that you mentioned, and I think that for a guy who's picked in the mid rounds of the draft, fourth round, where you're kind of just, if you hit on anything there at quarterback, you'll take it. If you hit on a backup in the fourth round, you'll take it. I think he's shown a lot to be impressed with through the first, 4 or 5 games of his development so far. What that'll mean long term, can't say yet. But
I think it's way too early. All right. I want to ask you about one of the things about Aiden that stuck out to me, and I'm there, I'm getting to talk to him and be around him, is the moment hasn't been too big for him. There's been times he didn't know what to do because he's just young. I mean, he comes in, you're the third guy automatically, so you get third guy reps in all the camps, and then bam, your coach throws you in the week of the Charger game, doesn't alter the system to work with what you do best or what you're prepared for. Asinine. But the thing is, the moment's never been too big. As soon as the game's over, I'm talking to him, and it's, man, I did this, I misread that, whatever. It's never been a moment of, man, I don't know what happened. None of that. And that's allowed his teammates to have a ton of faith in him. To me, that stuck out. Has that resonated with you?
I think it has. And again, like you said, his first 4 starts is going against some tough defenses. Played 2 top AFC contenders in Kansas City and Miami. And I think that when you look at the way his teammates have seemed to kind of rally around him and support him, that's important because, like it just didn't really click at all this year with Jimmy. And I don't think that's a statement against him personally. It's just it didn't work. Things just didn't seem to click within the framework of the offense and with the other personnel. It's important for a rookie quarterback to be able to go out there and feel like his teammates have his back and support him. I think we've seen that so far for Aiden O'Connell, and I think that these next few games are going to be a big test for him too, because when you look at it, that some of the teams they play, you got the Chiefs again on the road in Arrowhead, going to be a hostile environment. The Vikings are a 500 team, but their defense has played better under Brian Flores, and he loves to blitz. So he's going to throw a ton of stuff, the kitchen sink, at Aiden O'Connell. And then looking at the Broncos, now that game's in week 18, so there's a little bit of football left to be played, but the Broncos right now are the hottest team in football, probably. They're playing a lot better than they did at the beginning of the season. Vance Joseph's defense is looking nothing like the unit that gave up 80 or 70 points to the Dolphins. They played very well. So I think he'll have some big tests ahead of him, and I'm really interested to see how he fares.
All right, let's talk about Maxx Crosby. This is a guy with a work ethic like Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, Irvin Magic Johnson. He is an absolute. I mean, I sometimes I joke and say he's not human, but I hate to do that, and here's why. Because fans only see the people on the field, and they forget they are totally human. Um, but he is not normal. The way he works, I mean, this is a guy doesn't practice last week in the hospital one day. The first guy ever listed as doubtful in 2023 on a Thursday that ended up playing. And even though maybe 60% on Sunday, I asked him, you can go back and watch the video. He didn't want to answer. I'm just telling you, about 60%. Still gets a sack, still relentless. This guy, in my opinion, has emerged now in if you watched Hard Knocks with the Dolphins, as the best defensive player. If he were on a better team, this guy would be getting much more talk. He, in my opinion, has become the best defensive player in all the National Football League, and it's all him. It's all of his work ethic. He is a dog. He is everything that you want your football player to be. I don't care what position they play. Off the field, he's a gem of a human being. I consider him a friend, a gem of a human being. Great husband, great father, great son. His circle's small. He's got his foundation, which is near and dear to my wife and I's heart, about teen sobriety. He is a great example to his teammates. He's a leader. He brings guys together, but yet at the same time, not afraid to call guys out. I mean, this guy over this year has just become, in the words of Deion Sanders, him. I think he's the best defensive player. Arguably, I think he's top three players in the entire league, offense or defense. I think Patrick Mahomes has his work ethic, which is what makes Patrick special. Again, I love what Maxx Crosby has done, and I think it's extremely special. He's going to get my vote for Player of the Year. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think looking at this past weekend, and obviously you're there during the week and you see what guys are dealing with and injury status and get that information from the people within the building and around the organization. So you knew what he was up against. And listen, at 5-6 going into the game, Raiders, you're still technically in the playoff hunt. They are. But it would have been very easy to say he's down. Again, doubtful usually means almost 100% not playing. You said if you're doubt guys that have been listed as doubtful haven't played all year. It would have been very easy for him to say, I'm going to sit this one out.
Nobody would have blamed him.
I'm going to use the bye. I'm going to get healthy, and I'm going to come back after the bye ready to go for the last 5 weeks of the season. I think a lot of players would have done that, and I don't think anybody really would have had an issue with it. I think people would have understood it. And he was determined.
Matt, we missed what you just said. Matt, your connection was fragile. We missed what you just said. What'd you say?
I said no. I said I think a lot of people would have had a lot of players would have just sat out that game and use the bye to get healthy and come back ready for the last stretch of games. And there wouldn't have been a problem. I think fans would have accepted it. They wouldn't have had an issue with it. But he was determined to get out there and play. Like you said, his 60% is better than pretty much anybody else's almost 90 or 95%, let alone 100%. So, I mean, it was very impressive. He's put together, I think, and I do think it's good for him. The Raiders have had a handful of primetime games this year, whether it was the Jets game on Sunday Night Football a few weeks ago, whether it was the Pittsburgh game, whether it was the Monday night game in Detroit, some opportunities for him. Also playing, both New York teams, so the New York market gets to see him locally. I believe, did they play? They didn't play Philly this year, so I'm trying to think of other big markets. Boston playing the Patriots. See, people outside of the West Coast, outside of Raider Nation, get to see what he's about, to see what he brings to the table every week. So I think it's great for him.
I got to tell you, I do interviews, as you know, all over America, and and I do a lot of nationwide ones, the big national shows as well as local markets. And I tell everybody, this guy's worth the price of admission. You're going to laugh, but you know exactly what I'm talking about. This is a guy I would pay money to go see, and I get paid to watch him. This is a guy that, I mean, my children, this is what's cool for me, and you'll appreciate this. You and I get to know these guys as humans. And there are a lot of times your kids will say, boy, I like this guy, I like that guy. And you're kind of like, I know him. I don't like him. And you don't want to get into details, just please. I love that my kids love Max. I love that I tell every parent I know. I mean, he has a beautiful inside and out, an absolute beautiful wife. So I don't mean this in any way disrespectful to her, because let me tell you, as awesome as he is, she's fantastic. That's the kind of guy, forget football.
Hmm.
If he worked as a construction worker, this is the kind of guy I want my daughter to marry. He's an overcomer. He's tough. He's him. He's not entitled to anything. I'm going to go back and share a story. Now, I'm told there is a similar story to this with Kobe Bryant, although I can't verify because I didn't cover Kobe. Years ago, Michael Jordan, they wanted him to take a night off. It was the season where they won like 70 games, and they were so far ahead in the playoff races. And I'll never forget, Michael said, but what about the guy who saved his money to buy his son a ticket to this game for Christmas or his birthday? How do I tell him I just wanted a night off? And Michael Jordan refused to take a night off. Now, this is what's cool about Max. And again, I fully admit he's a friend. So you may say you're biased. Okay. I might be, but I don't care. This is a guy, maybe 60% injured with a bye week to get an extra week of rest, who says, no, I'm not doing that to Raider Nation. I'm playing. This guy does not like the fans. He loves them. They love him. He loves them. I'm going to share this with you because I'm about to make a very bold prediction. As long as the Raiders do nothing to screw it up so that he wants to leave, okay? I'm going to give him that caveat. When his career is over, he will be the most popular Raider of all time. We're talking Kenny Stabler, who's awesome. I love Kenny. I grew up in that era. I love him and Jim Plunkett. We're talking Matt Millen, who's one of my best friends. We're talking Bo Jackson, Marcus Allen, Jim Otto, who my father felt was God personified on the football field. You can pick any of the great ones. Howie Long,
Jack
no matter.
Tatum, all of them,
And
yeah.
Matuzak,
Yep.
Alzado, he is going to be the most popular Raider of all time. They love him. He loves them. He is committed to be the best that he can be. He does not take a practice off. He does not take a rep off. He does not take a game off. He is go, go, go off the field. He is all about people. Great father, great. I mean, again, that's a bold prediction, but I stand by it. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that is saying a lot because you're talking about a Raider history that includes three Super
6 decades.
Bowls, 6 decades, yeah, and talking, countless Hall of Famers. So for you to make that statement, I know what he shows on a daily basis has to be beyond impressive, and not just what he does on Sundays, but what he does around the facility and away from the field, you know, during the week as well. I mean, I think this is a guy. This is a guy that is a building block, like we talked about. He's someone that you kind of set it and forget it. He's on the field. You know, he's giving you 100%, and he's going to be a factor. And I think that where he's kind of, he's been impactful since he came into the league, but he's gone from being a guy like, whoa, this guy's good. He can play, to being one of the best, if not the best at his position, just like that, it seems like. But it's all, a matter of the dedication he's put in, how hard he's worked, how hard he's developed, and just kind of the general attitude he brings to the field that's enabled him to make those strides.
Nick Saban has said this many times, but I've heard him personally, that mediocre people hate high achievers and high achievers hate mediocre people. And this is what I really love about Maxx is he holds himself to a standard and then expects everyone around him to be at that standard. I've seen other people who hold everybody to a standard except themselves. And this is what's really cool. He is loved in his locker room, not universally. There's a couple guys that don't like him. One of them, it doesn't matter. A couple guys that don't like him. That's because they're mediocre. And mediocre people don't like high achievers. And so what I love, and I know this because I learned this from somebody in the organization, they watch who hangs around him, who gravitates to him. Because if you're going to gravitate and hang around with Maxx, you're going to have to live at a standard. And that is all they want to see. And I love the fact here is a guy that, think about this one. I mean, I got to cover him at Eastern Michigan, which, to be very honest, when you say cover him, you know, I had his coach on my radio show every week, and I went to a few games, but it wasn't like I cover the Raiders now because Eastern Michigan just isn't that big of a product. But this is a guy that coming out of high school, nobody wanted him. I mean, there was very little interest. He had a teammate that Eastern Michigan really liked, so they were interested. But he goes to Eastern Michigan. He fights upstream the total time he's there. He just fights and scraps. Coming into the NFL, a lot of people, well, maybe, whatever. And people disrespected him in the combine process. Raiders get him. What does he do? Just competes against himself. This is a guy, no entitlement, just absolutely, I am going to work harder than any of you. I've told this so many times. You got to come out. You fly out, stay with me. I want you to come to training camp next year because it'll be 120 degrees outside. Well, unless this coach does it differently, like John Gruden did. It's going to be brutally hot no matter how they do it. And it'll be day 13 of training camp, day 15. And people are dragging and hurt. He's still winning the sprints. He's still outworking everybody. And the thing that Maxx does that I respect is he hasn't lost this. Okay, now he has generational wealth. He's been able to provide for his family in a way, and he comes from a great family of hard workers. But he's able to provide in a way that they weren't able to do, not because they were bad, because they all worked hard and provided well, but he has generational wealth. And the money didn't change him. Hasn't, if anything, the money somehow made him more on edge to work harder, to prove I deserve it. It's just he's a unicorn. That to me is the amazing part of the Maxx Crosby story. What, isn't that cool?
It is, and I think it's a testament to kind of his personal character and a testament to everything that we talked about that he's overcome and battled through, and the fact that he kind of maintains that that level of authenticity, that level of being grounded, and kind of brings that effort still every day, and it hasn't changed him. That's special. It's something you don't see in everybody, especially the elite players. Well, sometimes actually you may see it sometimes in the elite of the elite, but sometimes in the good players, they're kind of content, or they get to a point and they plateau. But with him, obviously, he hasn't done that. He's continued to work, he continued to progress, he's continued to be who he is at all times, no matter how much success he's having on the field.
The thing that I like most about Maxx is I like the person. And I feel bad for fans. This isn't against fans. I know Maxx the man, and I know Maxx the football player. And I think he's going to be the greatest Raider of all time. I think he's the best defender and on his way to being the best player in the NFL. I don't think he's there yet, but I think he's close. And with all the accolades you can give him on the football field, it doesn't come close to who he is as a person. The fact that I told you I would want my daughter to marry somebody like him, it just the human being. I mean, here he is. He's got a beautiful wife, but inside even prettier than the outside, which is very similar to my wife. Beautiful, beautiful baby. Great family. His family is just top notch. His commitment to people. I'm going to say this to you, and this may shock you. My wife and I have never struggled personally with sobriety, but sobriety has been an issue that has been part of our life with other people around us. If Maxx Crosby wants that Super Bowl so bad because he's a champion, but if you went to him and said, Max, you can have a great career, make a ton of money, and win one Super Bowl, or have one kid learn your story, and not have sobriety issues, to not have one parent wake up one day and find out that their child with sobriety issues is dead, what would you pick? And I know Max, he'd say, give me the second one. And to me, when you are as classy as a human as you are a football player and you're one of the best, that's pretty darn cool. That's pretty darn cool. All right, let's keep moving. Josh Jacobs. This is a guy that I think the Raiders screwed up how they handled his franchise tag. Not that it was wrong and not that everybody knew a deal was done, but they could have got it done earlier and had him in training camp. This guy is a competitor. He's a fighter. He's a scrapper. Even with teams doing everything to sell out to stop him. I love the adjustments to the scheme now, where at least he's getting more touches. This is another guy. I think he has done very well. I think he's done well under AP. If they can get him for the right money, this is a guy I think you give a 2 or 3 year deal to if you're the Raiders. You don't go longer than that because he's a running back. But especially if you can get a 2 year deal, I think you go do it if you're the Raiders. Your thoughts on that?
I think it's been impressive the amount of workload he's handled and been asked to shoulder and done without a problem, considering he's in a contract year. He had the contract dispute already, and it is a season of transition for the Raiders where they are building for the future. It's not like it's a team that's in the playoffs competing to win, be a contender in the AFC. And he's still putting his body on the line. He's still willing to, shoulder that load and show up every week. I think it's very similar the situations through this entire process, and I think the way that their seasons have played out with him and Saquon Barkley here in New York, guys who or their teams have losing records, but they are playing extremely hard and they're out there, even if they're not 100%, they're taking the ball every week, even though it's a contract year, and they're willing to, to put those, because those carries, that mileage, that adds up for a running back. And you may only get one chance at a payday if you're a running back. So, it would be nice for the Raiders to keep a player like that. I think not just for their football productivity on the field, but also the culture of having a guy who has done that in the past and is able to, buy in and be an example for younger guys stepping in.
Yeah, I think if you're able to go to him and say, listen, we want to give you a 2 year, fully guaranteed $24 million deal, I think he would take that. And then you got him done for the next 2 years. It's settled and you keep moving. I think that's an affordable deal. But now that leads us to this leads us to our next question. Let's just go ahead and ask it right now. I want to talk about the future of the Raiders. Antonio Pierce. I think this guy has done absolutely everything that he can do to show people that he is that he can do this job. Now, I want to make a couple things very clear. I believe when you are a rare franchise, when you are a Las Vegas Raiders, which is one of the elite franchises, I don't think this is a place where you come to learn to be a head coach, because there's a learning curve to being a head coach. Okay. But when he got the interim job, I told everyone this could be good because this internship allows him to learn the nuances of the game. I've talked to so many coaches over my career who's like, I didn't realize all the media demands. I didn't, they're like, yeah, I figured you do 3 press conferences a week. They didn't realize you meet with the commentators for that week's games. There's radio. There's just so much that goes into it. There's personnel meetings. There's so much because they're used to being coordinators or coaches in the rooms. You're just not in the room all the time. You can't be. Are there issues? Is he learning about clock management? Yes, he is. Okay. His first challenge was a mistake. So he gets somebody up in the booth. And I asked him yesterday, and he didn't want to throw anyone under the boot into the rug, but somebody on Sunday tells him to challenge. He throws a challenge on 3rd and 1. I wouldn't have thrown that. But when the person you have upstairs is telling you to throw it, you throw it. So that's not a rookie coach mistake. Now, could be a rookie coach mistake by who you put in that spot. I don't know. I'm just saying, I get it. I understand it. This team is playing hard for him. I don't care who you are. If you can't see that this team is improved, you're just either a Chiefs fan or you're never happy. You're somebody that would win the lottery and bitch about paying the taxes. This is a team that's better, more well-rounded, more competitive, more fighting. And I'm going to tell you something. The key players in that locker room want him. They want him. And I think he's done everything to win the job. Now, someone said to me, well, would you give it to him right now? No, I wouldn't. If he'd beaten the Chiefs, yes. But let this play out. But, if they beat the Chiefs, yes. But if this guy gets to 8 or 9 wins, and yesterday's podcast, I talked about it, I'll talk about it now. If he gets to 8 or 9 wins, it doesn't matter who Mark Davis talks to or who's in his ear. To me, 8 or 9 wins, I think you give him a 3-year deal and say, listen, we're going to give you a 3-year deal because you haven't been head coach before. But you get to the playoffs, it automatically extends to 5 years, and it's a raise to XYZ. And by the way, the raise is retroactive. I think that's a great deal for Mark Davis. It's a great deal for the Raiders. It's a great deal for AP. Your thoughts?
It's funny. One of the things that's fascinated me is I want to see how it plays out because as we know, in college and pro football, the interim guy never usually doesn't get the full-time gig. Um, but because of what happened 2 years ago with Rich Bisaccia doing such a good job and getting the Raiders to the playoffs, and he had the support that he had, not just from the players, but also from a lot of the fan base, and then they didn't hire him full-time, and the McDaniels hire didn't work out, I wonder if Mark Davis is more amenable to promoting an interim head coach full time and will think longer about it in the offseason. Now, I guess again, it depends on how these last 5 games go. It depends on how what does he foresee doing at the GM position, because if he's not keeping Champ Kelly, it would be irresponsible. You can't force an outside GM to keep your interim head coach as a full-time guy. So we'll see what he does, though. But I think that so far, Antonio Pierce has put a lot of good things on tape. I think he's put a lot of good things, out there on his resume with how he's handled everything. That would, serve him well when it comes time to consider if he's worthy or ready to be the full-time guy.
Totally agree with you. I'm going to ask you this question. If you had to make a prediction today, do you think he's the head coach of the Raiders next year?
It's so tough for me to do without that kind of inside the building access that you have, and I'm kind of just looking at it from, 36.
But let me tell you, that's why I have you on this podcast every week, because you are in New York, you're a national media guy, And you see things from the macro. I see things from the micro. So there are times I'm in the building. I see things that others don't. I'm talking to people on a regular basis that you're not. But still, there is a value to our listener, to your bird's eye view. I'm just asking you, based on what you see, what you're hearing, do you think he's the coach next year?
To
If they
me,
win 8 or more games.
I think if he finishes strong, I think he will be because to me, it comes down to does Mark Davis have somebody in mind, dead set that he wanted, like John Gruden when he was hot, or how they wanted Tom Brady to be the quarterback last offseason, even though it didn't work out. If they have someone like that he knows he can get and he knows he wants, I'm not saying that these guys, I'm not reporting that these guys are under consideration. I'm just throwing examples because I've seen Raiders fans ask about these guys. A Bill Belichick, a Jim Harbaugh, someone like that. And I'm not saying that they are legit possibilities, but someone that's proven it at the level and would be, a no one's always a can't miss hire, but a hire that makes a lot of sense. I think you really have to think long and hard about giving him that job full time if he finishes with 8 or 9 wins, because he has so much experience within the organization, so much experience with the players in the roster, and you could kind of get sort of a base built there. And like you said, you don't have to give him a 5-year deal to start. Give him a 3-year deal. Tell him, listen, we want to, we're not guaranteeing it for you just yet, but if you continue to show this progress, then we'll bump it up.
Yeah, see, now I would go to him and say, listen, here's the deal. We're going to give you a 3-year fully guaranteed deal. Fully guaranteed. But at any point over those, which means you're going to get the 3 years. So at any point over those 3 years, you get to the playoffs, it automatically extends to 5 with a raise to X, and the raise is retroactive. To me, that's a no-brainer. And if you do that, you have to give the job to Chip Kelly, which, oh, by the way, I'm an advocate for, so I'm happy with that. All right. I want to talk about just a couple more players. Davante Adams. This is a guy. Now, the previous leadership, there were some guys that weren't going to get traded. Okay. There was no chance in hell. And they got a ton of calls. I know that for a fact. A ton of calls on Maxx Crosby. They wouldn't even listen. Maxx Crosby's going nowhere. We're not trading him. They got a ton of calls on Davante. And they're like, listen, we're not going to trade him, but we'll listen. Because if somebody wanted to do something stupid like 3 first-rounders, they would have dealt Davante. But it had to be stupid. So basically, he was untouchable. There was no desire to trade Colton Miller. Do I think they would have? Yeah. I think you could have got Colton for 2 firsts. But still, that's almost untouchable. I think you could have gotten Josh Jacobs, but would you be willing to give up a first for him? Mm-hmm. He would have been a first. Again, Daniel Carlson, AJ Cole, those guys aren't going to go anywhere. They're the best in the business, but they're kicker and punter. So I guess if you wanted to give up a first, you could have got them both. Yeah. But it's essentially not touchable because nobody's giving up a first for either one of those. The point of the matter is here's Davante, who is, in my opinion, the best wide receiver in the business, the best route runner. I mean, he does not have the speed of Tyreek Hill, and no one's pretending that he does. But Tyreek Hill cannot run the routes that he runs or do what he does. I believe that with Davante, as long as the Raiders don't do something stupid, he wants to be here. Now, I broke the story he was coming. I broke the story that after Derek was benched, that he wanted to stay. I've broken all the Davante stuff. As long as they don't do something stupid, I totally see him wanting to be here. Okay. That said, let's assume the Raiders do something stupid. Okay. They do something to anger the players, and he wants to go. I am not saying this is a possibility. I'm hoping that the Raiders don't do something stupid. But they deal him to the Jets for a 1, which is what he would cost. Now the Raiders have 2 first-rounders that they can package, possibly move up. Universally, the number 1 quarterback in this draft, with everybody I'm talking to around the league, is Drake May. But there are some other guys people like, but there are question marks. So you could package those 2 firsts and try to move up to get a Drake May with something else. Or do you keep those 2 firsts, get an offensive lineman, get a defensive lineman, come back in the second round, try to pick a quality quarterback that people like? The point of the matter is, I think Davante has done nothing to show me he's not the best. He's a competitor. He's a fighter. As long as the Raiders don't do anything stupid, he wants to be here. What are your thoughts on the value of Davante Adams?
Well, I think one thing caveat I will add in is it may not take the Raiders doing something dumb for him to want to leave. I can see the Jets being willing to give them an offer they can't refuse for Davante. Because here's the thing: the Jets are going on now to be 13 years of a playoff drought. Aaron Rodgers was basically given the keys to the franchise last offseason. He's the reason that Daniel Hackett's the OC. They've signed a few guys that he was close with from Green Bay, none of whom have worked out so far. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers is hurt. That's just more really bad luck than anything else. But if Aaron Rodgers is going to play next year, he basically has the Jets just completely under his grasp. And if he wants Robert Saleh to stay as the head coach, he'll still be there. If he wants Hackett to stay, he'll still be there. If they want to go out and get another quality receiver, who better to get to Davante Adams? They have Garrett Wilson and really just a bunch of mishmash in the position right now. They might be willing to throw something heavy at the Raiders for Davante Adams. So it might not be the Raiders screw something up and he wants to leave. The Jets can make an offer that the Raiders can't refuse. I can see a situation where that unfolds. Value-wise, if he stays with the Raiders on the field, he's obviously, it's an immense value. He's one of the best, if not the best, in his position. He gives you that trusted guy for a young quarterback to work with. He gives you that kind of bailout guy for an offense. You know that he can make plays for you. You know he's there, and you can trust that he will get open in a big spot. So I think the value he has is through the roof, and it'll be interesting to see how that plays out in the offseason.
You know, I'm going to say this. I disagree. I think if the Raiders did something stupid, Davante would want out. If they don't do something stupid, then somebody's going to have to make them a stupid offer to get him. Now, I don't care how stupid your offer is. I know under the previous leadership, Maxx Crosby was simply not up for sale. They didn't want to get rid of Davante. He didn't want to go. But if somebody would have offered something stupid, they would have listened. I think you have to always listen for something stupid. I am going to give you this caveat, and I'm going to be talking about this after the season. But if the Jets were to offer their first rounder and their defensive lineman
Quentin Williams?
Huh?
Quentin Williams?
Yeah. And Quentin Williams, I think the Raiders make that deal. Now, that's a stupid offer. If you're New York with 1 year on Aaron Rodgers' deal, that is such a stupid offer. You don't make that offer. And I think it would be stupid. If he wants to be a Raider, but the Jets are willing to make that offer, the next plane out of Dodge would take Davante. But again, I don't see the Jets doing that, but it's fascinating to me. All right. One last question I told you I want to ask you about, and to me, Robert Spillane, one of the best free agent signings. This guy has been a beast. I told everybody when the Raiders got him how upset the Steelers were and how good of a player it was. Last year, I think it was the last 6 or 8 games. I don't remember. He played every rep on special teams, every rep on defense. He is a workhorse. He breaks his hand, finishes the game, has surgery during the week, plays the next week. This guy has been a beast. He has a work ethic very similar to Maxx Crosby. This guy's been a great free agent signing, and in my opinion, one of the best free agent signings in the AFC. Your thoughts?
I think what he's given is that stability and that reliability in the middle. You need a strong backbone to your defense. And he certainly has provided that at linebacker. Like you said, he's out there every week, he's out there every rep. He gives you that production against the run, but also has shown he can play the pass as well. Seals the Jets game a couple weeks ago with that interception. And I think he's the type of player that you look for when you're trying to build something and get a ground floor established like the Raiders were this offseason and are right now going forward. So I think he's fulfilled all of those expectations and then some. And I think that he's a guy you can continue to count on beyond 2023 as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Great signing. All right. First of all, we didn't start the podcast with this, and I apologize, everybody. Merry Christmas to all of you. Matt, Merry Christmas to you, my friend. And appreciate all of you. We have
Merry
grown
Christmas to you as well.
so fast and so exponentially. Thank you for liking and following and sharing all of our information. We try to bring you the best Raiders information. Don't miss tomorrow's podcast, Going Inside the Mind of Mark Davis. I said earlier, I believe in the program, we talked about this yesterday. That's not true. I was thinking about it's going to be tomorrow. Make sure you're watching. We're going to have a lot of really deep dive information with you guys on how Mark Davis is going to handle this process moving forward. But Matt, personally, to you, you've been a friend of mine. I think it's been 13 years now, hasn't it?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, you stayed in my home. My son calls you Uncle Matt. Um, you know how much I love you, how much I appreciate you. Merry Christmas to you. Merry Christmas to all of our listeners. And I just appreciate you all. Again, thanks for following. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for sharing all of our information. Remember, never pay anybody for what we give you for free. So from all of us at Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation, Las Vegas Raiders Insider Podcast, from Matt, who represents the spun.com, and man, you should be putting that in your favorites, reading it every day. Remember, we're also part of the Fans First Sports Network. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Have a great time. Hope your Christmas shopping's going good. God bless you. We'll see you back here tomorrow.